Sarah had quit smoking 7 times. 7 times she had thrown away her last pack of cigarettes with conviction burning in her chest. 7 times she had told her friends and family that this was it, that she was done for good. And 7 times within days or weeks, she found herself standing in a convenience store, hands trembling as she reached for that familiar blue pack. The cashier never said anything. They had seen it all before. This is not a story about weakness. This is not a story about lack of willpower or insufficient motivation. This is a story about something far more fundamental, something that determines whether every single change you attempt in your life will succeed or fail. Sarah's problem was not that she lacked the desire to quit smoking. Her problem was that she was still fundamentally a smoker who was trying not to smoke. We live in a culture obsessed with willpower. Open any self-help book, watch any motivational video, listen to any productivity podcast, and you will hear the same message repeated endlessly. You just need to try harder. You need to be more disciplined. You need to want it more. If you fail, it is because you are weak. If you succeed, it is because you are strong. This narrative is so deeply embedded in our cultural consciousness that we rarely stop to question it. But here is the uncomfortable truth that researchers have known for decades. Willpower does not work, at least, not in the way we have been told it works. In the early 2000s, psychologist Roy Baumeister conducted a series of groundbreaking experiments that would fundamentally challenge our understanding of self-control. In one famous study, he brought hungry participants into a room filled with the aroma of freshly baked cookies. Half the participants were allowed to eat the cookies. The other half were told they could only eat radishes. Afterward, both groups were given impossible puzzles to solve. The radish eaters gave up much faster than the cookie eaters. Why? Because resisting the cookies had depleted their willpower reserves. This phenomenon, called ego depletion, reveals a crucial fact about human psychology. Willpower is not an infinite resource that you can simply summon through determination. It is more like a muscle that fatigues with use. Every decision you make, every temptation you resist, every impulse you suppress, drains this finite reservoir. By the end of a long day of resisting, of trying, of forcing yourself to do things that feel unnatural, you have nothing left. This is why your diet fails at night when you are tired. This is why you skip the gym after a stressful day at work. This is why Sarah always ended up buying cigarettes during moments of weakness. The statistics on New Year's resolutions paint a devastating picture. Research consistently shows that approximately 80% of resolutions fail by February. By the end of the year, only 8% of people have achieved their stated goals. 8%. That means 92% of people who set out with genuine intention and real desire to change fail to make that change permanent. These are not lazy people. These are not people who do not care. These are people who are using the wrong strategy. Consider the typical New Year's resolution. I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to go to the gym 3 times per week. I want to stop eating sugar. I want to save more money. I want to read more books. Notice the language here. Every single one of these statements is focused on behavior, on outcomes, on actions. Not one of them addresses the deeper question. Who do I need to become in order for these behaviors to feel natural? This is the fundamental error that dooms most attempts at change. We try to modify our behavior without modifying our identity. We try to run without becoming a runner. We try to save money without becoming a saver. We try to quit smoking without becoming a non-smoker. And because behavior is always downstream from identity, these attempts are exhausting and ultimately unsustainable. Think about it this way. When you rely on willpower to change your behavior, you are essentially fighting yourself. Part of you wants to go to the gym, but another part of you, a deeper part, still believes you are not the kind of person who goes to the gym. This creates an internal battle that you have to fight every single day. Eventually, inevitably, you will lose. Not because you are weak, but because you cannot maintain a behavior that conflicts with your self-image indefinitely. The real tragedy is not just that these efforts fail. The real tragedy is that each failure reinforces the very identity you are trying to escape. Every time Sarah bought cigarettes after swearing them off, she was not just relapsing into an old behavior. She was confirming to herself, at a deep psychological level, that she was a smoker, someone who cannot quit, someone who is weak, someone who will always return to cigarettes when things get hard. The failure was not just behavioral, it was existential. But if willpower does not work, what does? The answer lies not in your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive control and decision-making. The answer lies in something more fundamental. The answer lies in who you believe you are. Your identity is not just a label you apply to yourself. It is a filter through which every decision, every choice, every action must pass. When your identity changes, your behavior changes automatically, effortlessly, permanently. This is not motivational rhetoric. This is not positive thinking. This is a well-documented psychological phenomenon with decades of research behind it. When you change your identity, you change the very architecture of how your brain processes decisions. You stop fighting yourself and start flowing with yourself. The gym is no longer something you force yourself to do. It becomes something you do because that is who you are. Imagine Sarah, one more time, standing in that convenience store. But this time, something is different. This time, when the cashier asks if she wants her usual brand, she does not hesitate. She does not calculate whether she has enough willpower left for the day. She simply says, without thinking, I do not smoke. Not I am trying to quit. Not I should not. I do not smoke. Because she is no longer a smoker, trying not to smoke. She is a non-smoker. That shift, that seemingly subtle change in language and self-conception, is the difference between temporary behavior change and permanent transformation. It is the difference between 8% success and something far more powerful. In the chapters ahead, we are going to explore exactly how this transformation happens, why it works, and how you can engineer it deliberately in your own life. We are going to look at the science of identity, the mechanisms that keep you trapped in old patterns, and the specific protocols you can use to become someone new. But first, we need to understand exactly what identity is, where it comes from, and why it has such extraordinary power over your life. Imagine I offered you $10,000 to eat a live cockroach right now. No preparation, no seasoning. Just pick it up and eat it. Would you do it? Take a moment to notice your immediate reaction. Some of you recoiled at the very thought. You felt disgust rise in your throat. You thought, I could never do that. Some of you paused and thought, $10,000 is a lot of money. Maybe. And a small percentage of you thought, sure, why not? It is just protein. Now here is the fascinating question. Why do different people have such radically different responses to the same scenario? The cockroach is the same. The money is the same. The physical act required is identical. But your reaction is not based on any of these external factors. Your reaction is based entirely on who you believe you are. If your identity includes the belief that you are someone who would never eat insects, who values dignity over money, who has standards that cannot be compromised, then the offer is not even really an offer. It is an impossibility. You are not weighing pros and cons. You are not calculating whether the money is worth the temporary disgust. You are simply stating a fact about yourself. I am not the kind of person who does that. End of discussion. This is what author and habits expert James Clear calls the identity level of change. And it is, without exaggeration, the most important concept you need to understand if you want to change anything about your life permanently. Clear argues that there are 3 levels at which change can occur. The first level is outcomes. This is where most people operate. They set outcome-based goals. I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to run a marathon. I want to make $100,000 per year. The problem with outcome-based goals is that they focus on what you want to achieve, not who you wish to become. The second level is process. This is slightly better. Instead of focusing on the outcome, you focus on the systems and habits that lead to that outcome. I will go to the gym 4 times per week. I will track my calories. I will save 20% of every paycheck. Process-based change is more effective than outcome-based change because it focuses on behavior, but it still has a fundamental flaw. It is still something you are doing, not something you are being. The third level, the deepest and most powerful level, is identity. This is where you focus not on what you want to achieve or what you want to do, but on who you wish to become. The goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. The goal is not to save money. The goal is to become a saver. The goal is not to quit smoking. The goal is to become a non-smoker. This distinction might seem semantic at first, but it is not. The difference between I want to run a marathon and I am a runner is the difference between something you are trying to force and something that is simply true about you. Runners run. That is what they do. Not because they are constantly summoning willpower, but because running is part of their identity. When it rains, a person training for a marathon might skip their run, but a runner runs in the rain because that is what runners do. Clear discovered this principle not through research, but through his own life. After a severe injury in high school, he slowly rebuilt himself through tiny habits. But the real transformation happened when he stopped thinking of these habits as things he was doing and started thinking of them as evidence of who he was. He did not just write, he was a writer. He did not just lift weights, he was an athlete. And once that identity shifted, the behaviors became automatic. This is the power of identity-based change. When your behavior is aligned with your identity, it requires almost no willpower to maintain. Think about the difference between a smoker who is trying to quit and a non-smoker. The smoker who is trying to quit is engaged in a constant battle. They are at a party. Someone offers them a cigarette, and they have to resist. They have to remind themselves of all the reasons they should not smoke. They have to use willpower to override their desire, and sometimes they fail. But a non-smoker at the same party does not experience any internal conflict at all. Someone offers them a cigarette, and they simply say, "No thanks, I do not smoke." There is no temptation, because the behavior is not consistent with their identity. Your brain has a powerful mechanism for ensuring consistency between your beliefs and your behaviors. When these two things are aligned, you feel congruent, authentic, at ease. When they are misaligned, you feel dissonance, stress, internal conflict, and your brain will do everything in its power to resolve that conflict, usually by changing your behavior to match your beliefs. This is why identity is upstream from behavior. Your behavior is simply the physical manifestation of your beliefs about yourself. If you believe you are lazy, you will act lazy. And no amount of motivational videos will change that for long. If you believe you are disciplined, you will act disciplined, and it will require minimal effort. If you believe you are a non-smoker, you will not smoke, and it will not feel like sacrifice. But here is where it gets even more interesting. The relationship between identity and behavior is not one-directional. It is a feedback loop. Your identity shapes your behavior. Yes, but your behavior also shapes your identity. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Go to the gym once. You have cast one vote for being an athlete. Write one paragraph. You have cast one vote for being a writer. Choose salad instead of fries. You have cast one vote for being a healthy person. One vote does not change your identity. But 100 votes? 1,000 votes? Eventually, the evidence becomes overwhelming. You start to believe at a deep level that you are the kind of person who does these things. And once you believe it, the behavior becomes effortless. This is why crash diets fail, and why sustainable lifestyle changes work. A crash diet is something you do temporarily. It is not who you are. You are a normal person who is temporarily restricting your eating. And the moment the diet ends, you revert to your baseline identity. But if you slowly shift your identity to that of a healthy eater, someone who values nutrition and energy over temporary pleasure, then eating healthy is not something you do for a few weeks. It is just how you eat. It is who you are. Consider two people trying to save money. Person A sets a goal to save $5,000 in a year. They create a budget. They track their expenses. They resist impulse purchases through sheer discipline. Some months they succeed. Some months they fail. At the end of the year, they might hit their goal, or they might fall short. But either way, the process was a constant struggle. Person B, on the other hand, decides to become a saver. They think of themselves as someone who is financially responsible, someone who values security over consumption. When they see something they want to buy impulsively, they do not have to fight themselves. They simply think, I am not the kind of person who makes impulse purchases. The decision is automatic. The behavior is effortless. And at the end of the year, Person B has not only saved more money than Person A, but they have done so with far less stress and far more consistency. This is the core insight that will transform everything. Behavior is a lagging measure of identity. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your identity. If you want permanent change, you must change who you believe you are. But this raises a crucial question. If identity is so important, what exactly is identity? Where does it come from? Can it be changed? And if so, how? To answer these questions, we need to explore one of the oldest philosophical puzzles in human history. The ship of Theseus is a thought experiment that has puzzled philosophers for over 2,000 years. Here is the paradox. Imagine a wooden ship that has sailed for decades. Over time, individual planks begin to rot and are replaced with new planks. Eventually, every single plank of the original ship has been replaced. The question is this: is it still the same ship? Some philosophers argue yes. The ship maintained its structure, its function, its history throughout the process. The replacements were gradual. The ship never ceased to be a ship. It is the same ship in every meaningful sense. Other philosophers argue no, not a single molecule of the original ship remains. It is made of entirely different material. How can it be the same ship when nothing original is left? But here is where the paradox gets even more interesting. Imagine that someone collected all the original planks as they were removed and used them to build a second ship. Now you have two ships. One made of all new material but with the original structure. One made of all original material but assembled later. Which one is the real ship of Theseus? This ancient paradox is not just an abstract philosophical puzzle. It is a perfect metaphor for understanding human identity. You are the ship of Theseus. Every cell in your body is replaced over time. The person you were 10 years ago is physically different from the person you are now. Not a single atom remains the same. Your beliefs have changed. Your preferences have changed. Your memories have faded or been reconstructed. So are you still the same person? The answer, paradoxically, is both yes and no. You are the same person in the sense that there is continuity of consciousness, a narrative thread that connects past you to present you. But you are not the same person in the sense that everything about you, from your physical body to your psychological makeup, is constantly changing. Identity is not a fixed thing. It is a process. It is a story you tell yourself about who you are. And like any story, it can be edited, revised, or completely rewritten. This is simultaneously liberating and terrifying. It is liberating because it means you are not trapped by your past. The person you were yesterday does not determine the person you are today. It is terrifying because it means there is no solid, unchanging core self to hold on to. You are always in flux, always becoming, never finished. Modern psychology has confirmed what ancient philosophers intuited. Your sense of self is not a single, unified entity. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman describes two distinct selves that exist within each person. The experiencing self is the one living your life moment to moment. It feels pleasure and pain, joy and boredom, excitement and fear in real time. The remembering self is the one that tells the story of your life afterward. It constructs a narrative from selected memories and uses that narrative to make decisions about the future. These two selves often disagree. Your experiencing self might hate going to the gym in the moment, but your remembering self feels proud afterward and decides you should go again. Your experiencing self might enjoy eating an entire pizza, but your remembering self regrets it and judges you harshly. The person you think you are is largely constructed by your remembering self. It is the narrator of your life, constantly editing the footage to create a coherent story. And here is the crucial insight. That story, that narrative identity, is not objective truth. It is an interpretation. It is a pattern that your brain has imposed on the chaos of your lived experience. Your brain craves coherence. It wants your past actions to make sense, to fit together into a meaningful whole. So it selectively remembers events that support the story and conveniently forgets events that contradict it. If your story is that you are a lazy person, your brain will highlight all the times you procrastinated and minimize all the times you worked hard. If your story is that you are a disciplined person, your brain will do the opposite. The story becomes self-reinforcing. You look for evidence that confirms what you already believe about yourself and ignore evidence that contradicts it. This is why identity feels so solid and unchangeable, even though it is actually fluid and constructed. Your brain is working overtime to maintain the illusion of continuity, to make you feel like you are the same person you have always been. But you are not. You are changing constantly, whether you realize it or not. The question is whether you are changing deliberately or randomly. The neuroscience of identity reveals something even more profound. Your brain is not hardwired. It is plastic, constantly forming new connections and pruning old ones based on your experiences and behaviors. When you repeat a behavior, the neural pathways associated with that behavior strengthen. When you stop a behavior, those pathways weaken. Your brain is literally reshaping itself based on what you do and how you think. This means that identity is not just psychological, it is physical. When you change your identity, you are not just changing a story you tell yourself. You are changing the actual structure of your brain. You are rewiring the neural networks that determine what feels natural and what feels foreign, what feels like you and what feels like not you. Consider someone who identifies as a non-athlete. They have spent decades not exercising, and their brain has formed strong neural patterns around sedentary behavior. When they think about going to the gym, it feels unnatural, uncomfortable, wrong. But if they start exercising regularly, even in small ways, new neural pathways begin to form. The more they exercise, the stronger these pathways become. Eventually, not exercising feels wrong. The identity has shifted at a neurological level. This is why change is hard at first and easier later. You are not just fighting old habits. You are fighting old neural architecture. But with enough repetition, enough evidence, enough consistent action, the new architecture becomes dominant. The new identity becomes who you are, not just who you are trying to be. So the answer to the ship of Theseus paradox, as it applies to human identity, is this. You are the same person in the sense that there is narrative continuity, but you are also always becoming a new person. Every action, every thought, every choice is replacing a plank on your ship. The question is not whether you will change. The question is whether you will direct that change or let it happen randomly. Your identity is not your destiny. It is your starting point. And starting today, you can begin rebuilding your ship, one plank at a time, until you have become someone entirely new while still remaining, paradoxically, yourself. But this process is not as simple as just deciding to be different. Your brain has powerful mechanisms to keep you consistent with your existing identity. And the most powerful of these mechanisms is cognitive dissonance. In 1954, a woman named Dorothy Martin made a bold prediction. She claimed to have received messages from aliens warning that a great flood would destroy the world on December 21st. But there was hope. A flying saucer would rescue the true believers at midnight. Social psychologist Leon Festinger saw an opportunity. He and his colleagues infiltrated the group, pretending to be believers, to observe what would happen when the prophecy inevitably failed. December 21st arrived. The believers gathered, wearing no metal, as instructed by the aliens, waiting for their rescue. Midnight came and went. No flying saucer appeared. No flood came. The prophecy had failed spectacularly. So what happened next? Did the believers admit they had been wrong? Did they abandon their beliefs and go home embarrassed? No, they did the opposite. Within hours, Dorothy Martin received a new message. The group's faith had been so strong that God had decided to spare the world. The flood was canceled because of their devotion, and rather than quietly disbanding, the group became more evangelical, more committed to spreading their message than ever before. They called newspapers. They sought converts. They doubled down on beliefs that had just been proven false. Festinger published his findings in a groundbreaking book called When Prophecy Fails. But the real contribution was not the specific case study. It was the theory he developed to explain this bizarre behavior. He called it cognitive dissonance theory, and it remains one of the most important concepts in psychology. Here is the core idea. Humans have a fundamental need for internal consistency. When we hold two contradictory beliefs, or when our behavior contradicts our beliefs, we experience psychological discomfort. This discomfort is cognitive dissonance, and it is so unpleasant that we will go to extraordinary lengths to reduce it, often by changing our beliefs to match our behavior rather than the other way around. The cult members experienced severe dissonance. They believed they were special, chosen in possession of secret truth, but their behavior, giving up jobs and possessions and waiting for a spaceship that never came, suggested they were gullible fools. These two beliefs cannot coexist comfortably. So rather than change their identity from enlightened believers to foolish victims, they changed their interpretation of events. The prophecy had not failed. It had succeeded in a different way. Their identity remained intact. This might seem like an extreme example, but cognitive dissonance governs your behavior every single day. Every time you act in a way that conflicts with your self-image, you experience dissonance, and your brain will resolve that dissonance in one of two ways. Either you will change your behavior to match your identity, or you will change your identity to match your behavior. Here is where it gets fascinating. The direction of change depends on which is easier to modify in that moment. If changing your behavior is easy, you will change your behavior. But if changing your behavior is hard or impossible, you will change your beliefs instead. This is why people who act cruelly often convince themselves their victims deserved it. This is why people who cheat on their diets convince themselves it does not really matter. This is why people who fail to quit smoking convince themselves they never really wanted to quit anyway. Dissonance is not a bug in human psychology. It is a feature. It is the enforcement mechanism that keeps your identity stable. Without it, you would be a chaotic collection of contradictory behaviors with no coherent sense of self. But this same mechanism that keeps you stable also keeps you trapped. If your identity is that of a smoker, every attempt to quit creates dissonance, and unless you change your identity, your brain will resolve that dissonance by pulling you back to smoking. Festinger's original theory identified 3 ways people reduce cognitive dissonance. The first is to change the behavior to match the belief. If you believe smoking is bad but you smoke, the second is to change the belief to match the behavior. If you cannot stop smoking, you convince yourself smoking is not that bad, or that you will quit later, or that you are the exception to the health risks. The third, most interesting strategy is to add new cognitions that reduce the overall dissonance. You might acknowledge smoking is bad and continue smoking, but tell yourself you exercise regularly, so it balances out, or that stress is worse for your health than smoking, so the cigarettes are actually helping you cope. What determines which strategy your brain chooses? It comes down to which path offers the least psychological resistance. If changing your behavior is easy, you will change your behavior. If changing your beliefs is easier, you will change your beliefs. This is why identity is so critical. When the behavior conflicts with a deeply held identity, changing the behavior is extremely difficult. It requires fighting your sense of self every single moment. But when the behavior aligns with your identity, maintaining it is effortless. Research has shown that cognitive dissonance is not just a psychological phenomenon. It has measurable physiological effects. When people experience dissonance, brain imaging studies show increased activity in regions associated with emotional distress and conflict monitoring. Your body is literally in a state of stress when your beliefs and behaviors do not align. Heart rate increases, cortisol levels rise. The discomfort is not abstract, it is physical. This is why maintaining willpower-based behavior change is so exhausting. You are keeping your body in a chronic state of stress. A landmark study in the 1970s illustrated this perfectly. Researchers worked with two groups of smokers who wanted to quit. One group was given standard smoking cessation support, focusing on behavior modification, nicotine replacement, and willpower strategies. The other group received something different. They were encouraged to shift their self-identity from smoker to non-smoker. They practiced saying, "I am a non-smoker." They visualized themselves as non-smokers. They were asked to behave as if they were already non-smokers, even before they had fully quit. The results were dramatic. The group that worked on identity change had significantly higher quit rates and lower relapse rates than the behavior-focused group. Why? Because they had resolved the dissonance at its source. When you are a smoker trying not to smoke, every moment of restraint creates dissonance. You want a cigarette. You are a smoker, but you are not smoking. This internal conflict is exhausting and ultimately unsustainable. But when you are a non-smoker, there is no dissonance. Non-smokers do not smoke. That is just a fact. The behavior aligns perfectly with the identity. This is the key to understanding why willpower-based approaches fail. They create dissonance rather than resolve it. You are trying to force behavior that contradicts your identity, and cognitive dissonance theory predicts exactly what will happen. Eventually, your brain will eliminate the dissonance by either abandoning the new behavior, or more rarely, by changing your identity. And since changing identity is harder than changing behavior in the short term, most people simply revert to their old patterns. But here is the empowering flip side. If you can deliberately change your identity first, you can harness cognitive dissonance to make behavior change automatic. Once you genuinely believe you are a runner, not running creates dissonance. Once you genuinely believe you are a healthy eater, eating junk food creates dissonance. Once you genuinely believe you are a non-smoker, smoking creates dissonance. Your brain will work to eliminate that dissonance by pushing you toward behaviors that match your identity. This is not magical thinking. This is not the law of attraction or positive affirmations. This is a well-documented psychological mechanism. Change your identity, and your brain will change your behavior to match. The question is how to change identity deliberately and authentically, because you cannot just decide to be different and have it magically become true. Your brain is not that easy to fool. This is where we need to understand another crucial piece of the puzzle. A discovery made not by a psychologist, but by a plastic surgeon who noticed something strange about his patients.
Maxwell Maltz was a successful plastic surgeon in the mid-20th century. He performed thousands of procedures, correcting disfigurements, reshaping noses, removing scars, and he noticed something that troubled him deeply. Some of his patients, after receiving objectively successful surgery, would look in the mirror and feel beautiful for the first time in their lives. They would walk differently, talk differently, carry themselves with new confidence. The surgery had changed their self-image, and that changed everything.
But other patients, after equally successful surgery, would look in the mirror and still see themselves as ugly. The objective improvement made no difference to their subjective experience. They still felt disfigured, still carried themselves with shame, still acted as if nothing had changed. Maltz realized something profound. The surgery had changed their physical appearance, but it had not changed their self-image. And in the battle between external reality and internal self-image, the self-image always wins. This observation launched Maltz into a deep study of psychology, cybernetics, and human behavior. The result was his groundbreaking book, Psycho-Cybernetics, published in 1960. The core concept is simple, but revolutionary. Every human has an internal self-image, a mental blueprint of who they believe they are. This self-image acts like a thermostat. Just as a thermostat maintains a set temperature by turning heating or cooling on and off, your self-image maintains your identity by unconsciously adjusting your behavior. If your self-image is set to 70 degrees, meaning you believe you are a person of average attractiveness, average intelligence, average capability, then your behavior will automatically calibrate to maintain that level. If you start to succeed beyond what your self-image allows, you will unconsciously sabotage yourself to bring yourself back down. If you start to fail below what your self-image allows, you will unconsciously work harder to bring yourself back up. The thermostat keeps you at your set point. This explains so many puzzling behaviors. Why do lottery winners often end up broke within a few years? Because their self-image is still that of a working-class person who struggles with money. The sudden wealth creates massive dissonance, and their behavior unconsciously adjusts to eliminate that dissonance by spending everything. Why do successful people sometimes sabotage their own careers with scandal or self-destructive behavior? Because their internal self-image does not match their external success, and the dissonance becomes unbearable. Maltz worked with actors, athletes, and business executives to help them adjust their internal thermostats. He discovered that the self-image is not fixed, it can be changed, but it requires more than just positive thinking or affirmations. It requires what he called the law of practice. Your self-image adjusts based on the feedback it receives from your actual experiences and behaviors. You cannot just tell yourself you are confident. You have to act confidently and experience positive results enough times for your self-image to update. One of Maltz's key insights was the 21-day adjustment period. He noticed that it typically takes about 3 weeks for a change in physical appearance to be internalized into the self-image. The patient who gets a nose job does not immediately feel like someone with a different nose. For the first few weeks, they still expect to see their old nose in the mirror. But around day 21, something shifts. The new appearance becomes normalized. It is integrated into their self-image. It becomes who they are. This same principle applies to behavioral change. When you start a new habit that does not match your self-image, it feels fake, forced, uncomfortable. You are acting like someone you are not. But if you maintain that behavior consistently for about 3 weeks, your self-image begins to adjust. The new behavior starts to feel natural. It becomes part of who you are. The thermostat resets to a new temperature. Maltz was a pioneer in understanding what modern neuroscience has confirmed. Your self-image is stored in neural patterns, and those patterns can be rewritten through consistent experience. But the key word is consistent. 1 or 2 instances of new behavior do not change the self-image. They are dismissed as anomalies, exceptions that do not threaten the existing pattern. But when the brain receives consistent, repeated evidence that contradicts the current self-image, it has no choice but to update. Think of your self-image as a hypothesis about who you are. Like any scientific hypothesis, it is tested against evidence. If the evidence consistently contradicts the hypothesis must be revised. If you believe you are not a runner, but you run every single day for 3 weeks, your brain cannot maintain that hypothesis. The evidence is too strong. You are forced to update your self-image to incorporate this new reality. You become, at an identity level, a runner. This is why crash diets and extreme makeovers rarely lead to lasting change. They force a temporary behavior change without allowing the self-image to adjust. You lose 20 pounds in a month, but your self-image is still that of an overweight person. You feel like you are playing dress-up in someone else's body. The dissonance is unbearable, and eventually you revert to behaviors that match your internal thermostat. But if you lose weight slowly, if you give your self-image time to adjust along the way, the change can become permanent. You do not just lose weight, you become a healthy person. The thermostat resets. Maltz also discovered that the self-image can be adjusted not just through real experiences, but through vivid mental rehearsal. He worked with athletes who would visualize perfect performances in extreme detail, engaging all their senses, feeling the movements in their muscles. This mental practice was not just motivational, it was creating neural patterns that updated the self-image. The brain does not always distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. Both can shift the thermostat. This is not about lying to yourself or engaging in fantasy. It is about using the brain's own mechanisms to accelerate identity change. If you want to become confident, you cannot just think positive thoughts. You need to create experiences, real or vividly imagined, of behaving confidently and receiving positive feedback. Those experiences update your self-image. The thermostat shifts, and once it shifts, confident behavior becomes automatic because it is now consistent with who you believe you are. The power of Psycho-Cybernetics is that it gave people a practical framework for identity change. You are not trapped by who you have been. You have an internal thermostat, and you can adjust it. But you must do so through actual experience, through consistent evidence that your brain cannot ignore. You must prove to yourself that you are someone new, and the way you prove it is through action. This brings us to the most important concept in this entire framework, the evidence loop. Picture this. A man who has struggled with alcohol for 15 years attends his first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. 30 days later, he is at a party. A friend, not knowing his situation, offers him a beer. He smiles and says, "No thanks, I do not drink." Not "I am trying to quit." Not "I should not, I do not drink." It is a statement of fact, delivered with the same casual confidence as "I do not speak French" or "I do not play chess." This is not a decision he is making in the moment. This is an identity he is expressing. How did he get here? How did someone who drank heavily for 15 years become someone who says, "I do not drink" with genuine conviction? The answer is the identity behavior feedback loop. And it is the most powerful mechanism of lasting change that exists in human psychology. Here is how it works. Your identity shapes your behavior. This is what we have established. If you believe you are a smoker, you smoke. If you believe you are a non-smoker, you do not smoke. But the relationship does not stop there. Your behavior also shapes your identity. Every action you take is a signal to your brain about what kind of person you are. And when those signals accumulate, they become evidence that your brain uses to update your self-concept. James Clear calls this casting votes for your identity. Every time you go to the gym, you cast a vote for being an athlete. Every time you choose a salad over fries, you cast a vote for being a healthy eater. Every time you sit down to write, you cast a vote for being a writer. One vote does not change an election, but 100 votes, 1,000 votes, eventually the votes become overwhelming, and your identity shifts to match the evidence. This is why small habits are so powerful. Not because they produce immediate results, but because they produce immediate identity evidence. You do not need to write a novel to be a writer. You just need to write one paragraph today. That paragraph is evidence. It is proof that you are the kind of person who writes. Tomorrow, you write another paragraph. More evidence. After 30 days, you have 30 pieces of evidence that you are a writer. Your brain looks at this data and updates its model of who you are. You are not trying to be a writer. You are a writer. This is just what you do. The mathematics of identity evidence is elegant. Each action is a data point. Your brain is essentially running a statistical analysis on your behavior to determine who you are. In the beginning, when you have very few data points supporting your new identity, each new action has significant weight. The first time you go for a run, that single action might represent 100% of your evidence for being a runner. The second time, it is 50%. By the 100th time, each individual run represents only 1% of your total evidence. But by then, you do not need that single run to matter as much. You have accumulated so much evidence that your identity as a runner is unshakable. This is why consistency beats intensity. Someone who runs 5 miles once per week generates 4 data points per month. Someone who runs 1 mile every single day generates 30 data points per month. Even though the weekly runner covers more total distance, the daily runner is accumulating identity evidence 7 times faster. And identity is built on repetition, not duration. Your brain does not care how long you did something. It cares how often you did something. Consider the difference between two people trying to become healthier. Person A commits to an intense workout routine. They hit the gym for 90 minutes, 6 days per week. For the first week, they are on fire. They feel amazing. They are transforming. But by week 2, they are exhausted. They miss a day, then another. By week 3, they have quit entirely. Despite their intensity, they generated only about 10 to 12 pieces of identity evidence before stopping. Their brain looked at this data and concluded, this was a temporary phase, not who you are. This is the trap that keeps people stuck for decades. They have accumulated so much negative evidence about themselves that their identity is now defined by limitation. I am not good with money. I am not a morning person. I am not creative. I am bad at relationships. I have no willpower. These are not just beliefs. These are identity claims backed by years of behavioral evidence. And every day they continue to act in ways that reinforce these identities, creating more evidence, deepening the groove. Breaking out of a negative identity spiral requires what Maltz called the law of practice, combined with what Clear calls the 2-day rule. You must create new evidence while simultaneously being gentle enough with yourself that occasional setbacks do not destroy your emerging identity. The 2-day rule is simple. You are allowed to miss 1 day of your new behavior. Life happens. You get sick. You have an emergency. Fine, but you never miss 2 days in a row. Missing 1 day is an exception. Missing 2 days is the start of a new pattern, a pattern that will generate evidence against your desired identity. The recovering alcoholic at the party who says, I do not drink, has cast thousands of votes for that identity. Every morning he woke up sober was a vote. Every social situation he navigated without alcohol was a vote. Every craving he acknowledged and did not act on was a vote. After 30 days, after 90 days, after a year, the votes are so overwhelming that the identity is no longer aspirational. It is factual. He is not trying to be a non-drinker. He is a non-drinker. And when you are a non-drinker, not drinking is not a decision. It is not something you have to think about or resist or manage. It is just who you are. This is the power and the danger of the evidence loop. You are always generating evidence about yourself. The question is, what kind of evidence you are generating? Every single day, with every single action, you are either building the identity you want or reinforcing the identity you are trying to escape. There is no neutral. Every vote counts. And this brings us to a crucial question. How do you start? How do you cast that first vote for a new identity? When your current identity is backed by years, maybe decades of contradictory evidence. How do you become someone new when you have so much proof that you are someone old? The answer begins with a single moment, a moment of decision. James Clear did not become a writer by writing a best-selling book. He became a writer the moment he decided, internally and completely, that he was a writer. This happened years before he made a single dollar from writing. Years before anyone read his work. He was a college student with a head injury, struggling to rebuild his life, and he made a decision. I am a writer. Not, I want to be a writer. Not, I am going to try to be a writer. I am a writer. That decision changed everything. This might sound like semantics, but it is not. The language you use to describe yourself is not just a label. It is an instruction to your brain about how to behave. When you say, I want to be a writer, you are locating the identity in the future. You are someone who is not a writer but wishes to be one. When you say, I am trying to be a writer, you are acknowledging that you are acting like a writer, but do not actually believe you are one. But when you say, I am a writer, you are claiming the identity now, in the present, regardless of external validation. And that claim, that internal commitment, is the foundation of all identity change. This is stage 1 of the identity shift protocol, the decision. And it is not as easy as it sounds. You cannot just say, I am a billionaire and expect it to work. Your brain is not that gullible. The identity you choose must be specific, believable, and actionable. It must be something your brain can accept as possible, even if it requires evidence to fully believe. Specificity matters. I want to be successful is not an identity. It is too vague. Successful at what? I am an entrepreneur is better. I am a software entrepreneur. Building a SaaS business is even better. The more specific the identity, the clearer the behaviors that align with it. Your brain needs concrete actions to take, concrete evidence to generate. Believability matters. If you have never exercised a day in your life, claiming I am an elite marathon runner will create so much dissonance that your brain rejects it immediately. But I am someone who moves their body every day. That is believable. I am an athlete in training. Your brain can work with that. You start with an identity that is a stretch but not a fantasy. As evidence accumulates, you can expand the identity. Actionability matters. I am someone who is lucky is not actionable. There is no specific behavior that generates luck. But I am someone who takes calculated risks is actionable. I am someone who networks consistently is actionable. The identity must imply clear behaviors that you can execute starting today. Once you have chosen your target identity, you must commit to it psychologically. This is where most people fail. They hedge, they qualify. They say, I am trying to be a runner, or I guess I am kind of a writer, or maybe I will become a non-smoker. This language reveals that they have not made the identity decision. They are still negotiating with themselves, still leaving an escape route, still protecting their ego in case they fail. The identity decision requires what feels like an irrational leap of faith. You have to claim an identity that you do not yet have evidence for. You have to say, I am a runner, before you have run a single mile. You have to say, I am a non-smoker, while the nicotine is still in your bloodstream. This feels fake at first. It feels like lying to yourself. And in a sense, it is. You are temporarily operating as if something is true that is not yet fully true. But this is not delusion. This is direction. You are not claiming the identity because it is currently accurate. You are claiming it because it is the person you are committed to becoming. And by claiming it now, you are giving your brain a clear instruction. This is who we are. Act accordingly. Generate evidence to support this. Resolve all dissonance in favor of this identity. This is why the language shift from I want to be to I am is so powerful. It moves the identity from the future to the present. And when the identity is in the present, every action you take either confirms it or contradicts it. That creates immediate pressure to behave in alignment. When you say, "I want to be a writer," not writing today does not matter much. You still want to be a writer tomorrow. But when you say, "I am a writer," not writing today creates dissonance. Writers write. If you are not writing, are you really a writer? Your brain feels this tension and pushes you to resolve it by writing. The psychological commitment mechanism is ancient. Humans are consistency machines. Once we declare something publicly, or even privately, but definitively, we feel enormous pressure to act consistently with that declaration. This is why public commitments are more powerful than private ones. Once you have told other people, "I am a non-smoker," backing down means not just failing yourself, but contradicting your public identity. The social cost of inconsistency adds additional pressure to maintain the new behavior. But even without public commitment, the internal commitment is powerful. You have drawn a line in the sand of your own mind. On one side is your old identity. On the other side is your new identity. And you have stepped across. Now every action is evaluated based on which identity it supports. This makes decision-making simpler. You do not have to debate whether to go to the gym today. You are an athlete. Athletes go to the gym. End of discussion. This is why recovering addicts often date their sobriety from a specific moment. Not the last time they used, but the moment they decided, truly decided that they were done. That decision is the identity shift. Everything after is just evidence accumulation. But without that decision, without that psychological commitment to a new identity, the behavior change is just temporary abstinence. And temporary abstinence always ends. You have claimed the identity. You have committed to being someone new. But your brain does not believe you yet. It has years of contradictory evidence. It is skeptical. It is waiting to see if you are serious, or if this is just another fleeting attempt that will fade in a few days. This is where stage 2 becomes critical. You must prove it to yourself. You must generate evidence. Jerry Seinfeld, one of the most successful comedians of all time, credits his career to a simple calendar trick. When he was a young comedian trying to improve his craft, he decided he needed to write jokes every single day. So he put a big wall calendar in his apartment. Every day that he wrote, even if it was just for 10 minutes, he would mark a big red X on that day. After a few days, he had a chain of X's, and his only job was to not break the chain. This is stage 2 of the identity shift protocol, evidence accumulation. And the key principle is this: the size of the action does not matter nearly as much as the consistency of the action. You do not need to write for 3 hours to be a writer. You need to write every day, even if it is just one sentence. You do not need to run 10 miles to be a runner. You need to put on your shoes and run around the block every single day. You do not need to meditate for an hour to be someone who meditates. You need to sit down for 2 minutes every morning. Why does this work? Because your brain is not counting words or miles or minutes. Your brain is counting instances. Every single time you engage in the behavior, you are casting a vote for the identity. You are generating a piece of evidence. And what your brain cares about is the pattern. If you write 3,000 words once per month, you have cast 1 vote per month for being a writer. But if you write 100 words every single day, you have cast 30 votes. The daily writer has generated 30 times more identity evidence than the monthly writer, even if the monthly writer produced more total output. This is why the minimum viable action is so important. The minimum viable action is the smallest thing you can do that still counts as evidence for your identity. For a writer, it might be writing 1 sentence. For an athlete, it might be doing 10 push-ups. For a meditator, it might be taking 3 conscious breaths. The action is so small that you cannot talk yourself out of it. There is no excuse valid enough to skip something that takes 2 minutes. But here is the crucial part. It must actually count. You cannot just think about writing and call yourself a writer. You cannot just put on gym clothes and call yourself an athlete. You must actually execute the behavior, even in its most minimal form, because your brain knows the difference between thinking about something and doing something. Only doing generates evidence. James Clear calls this the 2-day rule, and it is non-negotiable. You are allowed to have a bad day. You are allowed to do the absolute minimum. You are allowed to phone it in and just barely check the box. But you are never, ever allowed to skip 2 days in a row. Why? Because 1 missed day is an exception. 2 missed days is the beginning of a new pattern. And patterns are what your brain uses to determine identity. If you are building the identity of a runner, and you miss 1 day, your brain registers it as an anomaly. You are still a runner who missed 1 day. But if you miss 2 days, your brain starts to question, are you really a runner? Runners run. Miss 3 days, and the identity is in serious jeopardy. Miss a week, and you are back to being someone who used to run. The identity has been lost. This is why crash programs fail, and why sustainable systems work. A crash program asks you to do too much, too soon. You are trying to go to the gym for 2 hours every day when you have not exercised in years. Your brain does not have the identity foundation to support that behavior. So you do it for a few days, maybe a week, powered by motivation and willpower. But then you miss a day, and because the bar was set so high, missing 1 day feels like total failure. So you miss another day, and another. And within 2 weeks you have quit entirely. Not only did you fail to build the identity, but you generated evidence that you are someone who fails at self-improvement. Contrast this with the minimum viable action approach. You commit to 10 minutes at the gym every single day. That is it. 10 minutes is so small that even on your worst day, even when you are sick or exhausted or overwhelmed, you can probably do it. And even if you cannot, you can do 5 minutes, or you can do 1 push-up. The bar is low enough that you almost never miss. And because you almost never miss, you are constantly generating evidence. After a month, you have gone to the gym 30 times. Your brain looks at this data and concludes, obviously you are someone who goes to the gym. You are an athlete. The identity has been established. And here is the beautiful part. Once the identity is established, the behavior naturally expands. You go to the gym for 10 minutes. But once you are there, you often stay for 30. You write 1 sentence, but once you have momentum, you often write 3 paragraphs. The minimum viable action gets you started. The identity keeps you going. This is the evidence loop in action. Small, consistent actions generate identity evidence. Identity evidence shifts your self-image. A new self-image makes aligned behaviors feel natural. Natural behaviors are easy to maintain. Easy maintenance generates more evidence. The loop accelerates. Within weeks, you are not trying to be someone new. You are someone new. But there is a third component that dramatically accelerates this process. Something that humans have used for thousands of years to reinforce identity. Social reinforcement. The first thing you say when you stand up at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting is your name, followed by I am an alcoholic. This seems counterintuitive. If you are trying to stop drinking, why would you claim an identity as an alcoholic? Because AA understands something profound about human psychology. Identity is not just internal, it is social. And when you claim an identity in front of a group, when other people witness and validate that identity, it becomes exponentially more powerful. This is stage 3 of the identity shift protocol. Social reinforcement. And it is based on one of the most well-documented principles in social psychology. Humans are social animals. Our sense of self is not constructed in isolation. It is constructed in relationship to others. We learn who we are by seeing how others respond to us. by noting which groups we belong to, by comparing ourselves to those around us. Your identity is partially a social construction, and that means society can be leveraged to accelerate identity change. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch conducted a series of experiments that would become legendary in the field. He brought participants into a room with several other people who were actually Confederates working with Asch. The group was shown a line on a card, then asked which of 3 other lines matched its length. The answer was obvious, but the Confederates intentionally gave the wrong answer. The question was whether the real participant would trust their own eyes or conform to the group. The results were shocking. 75% of participants conformed to the group at least once, giving an answer they knew was wrong because everyone else was saying it. Asch had discovered the power of social conformity. Humans have a deep psychological need to fit in with their group, and that need is so strong that it can override even clear sensory evidence. This might seem like a weakness, a flaw in human psychology, but it is actually a feature that can be harnessed for identity change. If you surround yourself with people who embody the identity you are trying to build, your brain will naturally start to conform to that group's norms. You do not have to fight yourself. You are simply doing what feels natural in that social context. Consider 2 people trying to become runners. Person A tries to do it alone. They set their alarm. They force themselves out of bed. They trudge through their run in isolation. Every single run is a battle against their old identity. They are constantly generating evidence, but they are doing it in a vacuum. Person B joins a running group. They show up to group runs twice per week. They are surrounded by people for whom running is normal, natural, enjoyable. They hear runners talk about races, about training plans, about recovery strategies. They see themselves reflected back as a runner because the group treats them as a runner. Their brain absorbs this social reality and begins to internalize it. Person B is generating identity evidence at twice the speed of Person A, not because they are running more miles, but because they are getting social validation for the identity. This is why AA works. Not because of the 12 steps, though those have value. Not because of the higher power concept, though that resonates for some. AA works because it provides a social context where your identity as a recovering alcoholic is validated, witnessed, and reinforced by others who share that identity. You are not fighting alone. You are part of a tribe, and that tribe's norms become your norms. The tribe does not drink, therefore you do not drink. The social pressure to remain consistent with the group is immense. The power of tribe identity has been documented extensively in anthropology and social psychology. Humans evolved in small groups, where your identity was inseparable from your role in the tribe. The hunter's identity was reinforced every time the tribe ate meat. The healer's identity was reinforced every time someone was cured. The storyteller's identity was reinforced every time the tribe gathered around the fire. This social reinforcement was not just validation, it was survival. If the tribe stopped seeing you as a hunter, you lost your role. If they stopped seeing you as valuable, you were cast out. Modern society has largely stripped away these tribal identity structures, but the psychological mechanisms remain. Your brain still craves social validation of your identity. This is why online communities, despite being virtual, can have profound effects on identity formation. A person who joins a community of writers and participates actively will internalize the writer identity faster than someone who writes alone. The community provides constant reinforcement. You post your work, people respond. You are seen as a writer. Your brain absorbs this social reality. But social reinforcement has a dark side. Just as positive communities accelerate positive identity formation, toxic communities accelerate toxic identity formation. If you join a community of perpetual victims, you will absorb a victim identity. If you join a community that celebrates mediocrity, you will normalize mediocrity. If you join a community defined by what they are against rather than what they are for, you will develop a reactive rather than proactive identity. The mechanism is neutral. It amplifies whatever the group embodies. But here is where it gets interesting. You do not need to join a formal group to leverage social reinforcement. You just need to strategically broadcast your identity to the right people. This is what James Clear did when he started sending out a weekly email about his ideas. He was not just writing for himself. He was writing for an audience, even a tiny one. Every week, he had to show up as a writer because people were expecting it. That expectation created accountability. That accountability reinforced the identity. Public commitment is a powerful tool. When you tell people, I am training for a marathon, you have created social stakes. If you quit, you do not just fail privately, you fail publicly. You have to explain why you gave up. You have to face the disappointment or judgment of others. This is uncomfortable enough that it significantly reduces the likelihood of quitting. Your identity is now partially held in place by social expectations. But public commitment has a dark side. If you broadcast your identity before you have generated any evidence, before you have proven it to yourself, you risk what psychologists call social identity fulfillment. Your brain gets a hit of validation from the announcement itself, which reduces the psychological pressure to actually do the work. This is why people who announce their goals publicly sometimes achieve less than people who keep them private. The announcement satisfies the need for validation without requiring any actual effort. The solution is to balance private evidence accumulation with strategic public commitment. You start building the identity in private. You cast your votes. You generate evidence. Once the identity starts to feel real, once you have a foundation, then you make it public. You join the running group after you have been running consistently for a month. You start the blog after you have been writing consistently for 3 months. You tell people you are a non-smoker after you have been smoke-free for 30 days. The public commitment reinforces an identity that is already emerging, rather than trying to create an identity out of thin air. There is another dimension to social reinforcement that is equally important. The people you spend time with are not just witnesses to your identity. They are models for your identity. Your brain is constantly running pattern recognition algorithms, trying to figure out what normal looks like, and it determines normal by observing the people around you. If you want to become wealthy, surround yourself with wealthy people, not because they will give you money, but because your brain will normalize wealth. It will see that wealthy people are just regular people who happen to have different habits and mindsets. And those habits and mindsets will start to seem achievable, natural, like something you could do too. This is why your environment is so critical to identity change. You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, not because they directly change you, but because they change what your brain considers normal. If your 5 closest friends are all overweight and sedentary, your brain will consider that normal. Being fit will seem like an aberration, something that requires extraordinary effort. But if your 5 closest friends are all fit and active, your brain will normalize fitness. Being sedentary will seem like the aberration. This is not about judging your current friends. This is about understanding how identity formation works. If you want to change who you are, you need to change the social context that is reinforcing your current identity. This might mean joining new groups. It might mean spending less time with certain people and more time with others. It might mean actively seeking out mentors and models who embody what you are trying to become. The danger, of course, is choosing the wrong group. Because just as positive identity groups can accelerate growth, toxic identity groups can accelerate decline. If you join a group that defines itself by victimhood, by limitation, by complaint, you will absorb that identity. If you join a group that normalizes destructive behavior, you will be pulled toward that behavior. The social reinforcement mechanism is neutral. It amplifies whatever the group embodies. This is why the identity you claim and the group you join must be aligned with the person you actually want to become, not just the person you currently are. You are not looking for a group that validates your current limitations. You are looking for a group that models your future potential. Your environment does not just influence you, it defines you. Which brings us to a crucial complication. What happens when you are trying to build multiple identities? What happens when different parts of your life require different versions of yourself? You are a different person at work than you are at home. You behave differently with your parents than you do with your friends. You have a different personality at the gym than you do at a dinner party. This is not hypocrisy. This is not being fake. This is the reality of human psychology. You are not one fixed self. You are a collection of context-dependent selves. This raises an uncomfortable question. If you are trying to shift your identity, which self are you trying to shift? And what happens when your different selves are in conflict? Imagine a man who identifies as a disciplined athlete when he is at the gym. He wakes up early. He trains hard. He pushes through pain. But at home, he identifies as someone who deserves to relax and enjoy himself. He eats junk food. He skips meal prep. He stays up late watching TV. At work, he identifies as a high performer, someone who is ambitious and driven. But in his personal relationships, he identifies as someone who is laid back and non-confrontational, someone who avoids conflict even when it is necessary. These are not separate people. This is one person with multiple, sometimes contradictory identity contexts, and the contradiction creates problems. The athlete identity says you should eat healthy. The relaxation identity says you should enjoy pizza. Both identities are real. Both are pulling you in different directions. The result is not balance. The result is inconsistency, confusion, and often self-sabotage. This is the multiple selves problem, and it is one of the most overlooked aspects of identity change. Most advice tells you to become someone new, but it does not tell you what to do when that someone conflicts with other versions of yourself that you need or want to maintain. Psychologists have long understood that humans display different personalities in different contexts. This is called the situational self, and it is both normal and necessary. You cannot be the same person in every situation. The way you behave with your boss requires a different identity than the way you behave with your children. The question is not whether you have multiple identities. The question is whether those identities are coherent or contradictory. Coherent, multiple identity stack. They reinforce each other rather than undermine each other. Imagine someone who identifies as a learner. That core identity can manifest differently in different contexts. At work, they are someone who seeks feedback and takes courses. At home, they are someone who reads and asks curious questions. At the gym, they are someone who studies proper form and tracks progress. The specific behaviors change, but they all flow from the same core identity. Being a learner in one area reinforces being a learner in other areas. Contradictory. Multiple identities clash. They create internal conflict and limit your potential in every domain. Imagine someone who identifies as ambitious at work, but lazy at home. These identities are in direct conflict. If you are truly ambitious, you cannot also be lazy. Ambition requires energy, discipline, and follow-through in all areas of life. But if you allow yourself to be lazy at home, you are training those neural patterns, and those patterns will inevitably leak into your work life. You will find yourself procrastinating at work, making excuses, avoiding hard tasks. The lazy identity will sabotage the ambitious identity. The solution to the multiple selves problem is twofold. First, identify and eliminate identity conflicts. Second, build a core identity that is broad enough to encompass multiple domain-specific identities without contradiction. Identifying identity conflicts requires honest self-examination. You need to list the different identities you hold in different contexts and look for contradictions. Are you disciplined at work but undisciplined at home? Are you confident in your career but insecure in your relationships? Are you healthy during the week but reckless on weekends? Each of these represents an identity conflict that will limit your growth. Once you have identified the conflicts, you have a choice. You can either eliminate one of the contradictory identities, or you can find a way to reconcile them under a broader identity. If you are disciplined at work but undisciplined at home, you cannot truly be disciplined. Discipline is not contextual. It is a character trait. So you either need to become disciplined in all areas of your life, or you need to stop claiming the identity of a disciplined person. Anything in between is self-deception. This sounds harsh, but it is liberating. Once you eliminate the contradictions, you no longer have to manage multiple conflicting versions of yourself. You have a coherent identity that you can express consistently across contexts. This reduces cognitive load, eliminates internal conflict, and allows you to build momentum that carries across all areas of your life. The second part of the solution is building a core identity. A core identity is a meta-level belief about who you are that is broad enough to encompass multiple specific identities. For example, if your core identity is I am someone who grows, then you can be a learner at work, a learner at home, a learner in relationships, a learner in health. The specific domain changes, but the core identity remains consistent. This creates alignment and momentum. James Clear is not just a writer. He is someone who seeks clarity and shares what he learns. That core identity allows him to write, to speak, to coach, to experiment with habits, to be a father, to be a husband, all without contradiction. Each role is a different expression of the same core identity. This is identity stacking, done right. But there is a danger here too. You can build multiple identities, but you have limited cognitive and emotional resources. Every identity you maintain requires energy and attention. If you try to be too many things, you will spread yourself too thin. You will not build deep expertise or strong identity evidence in any domain. You will be a mediocre version of many things, rather than an excellent version of a few things. The solution is to be strategic about which identities you build. Choose identities that align with your core values and goals. Choose identities that reinforce each other rather than compete with each other. And be willing to let go of identities that no longer serve you, even if they are comfortable or familiar. This is hard because identities, once established, are sticky. They become part of your self-story. Letting go of an identity can feel like losing a part of yourself. But the truth is, you are always changing. You are always letting go of old identities and adopting new ones. The question is whether you are doing it consciously and strategically, or whether you are drifting. You can be many things, but some identities will sabotage others if you are not careful. The key is conscious integration, building a coherent self-narrative that allows you to express different facets of yourself without internal contradiction. This is not about becoming one-dimensional. This is about becoming integrated. And integration is the foundation of lasting change. But there is a shadow side to identity that we must address, because the same mechanism that can free you can also trap you. In 5th grade, Emily got her first math test back, a C-. She stared at the red marks covering her paper, feeling something shift inside her. She looked around the room at the kids who had gotten A's. They were smart. She was not. That day, Emily decided something that would shape the next 20 years of her life. I am just not a math person. This is not a unique story. Almost everyone has some version of it. A moment in childhood or adolescence where a failure or criticism crystallized into an identity. I am not artistic. I am not athletic. I am not good with people. I am not the kind of person who succeeds. These identities form quickly, often based on very limited evidence. But once formed, they become self-fulfilling prophecies that trap people in patterns of limitation for decades. This is the identity trap. The same mechanism that allows you to become someone new can lock you into being someone old, because identity by design creates consistency. It filters your perception, shapes your decisions, and guides your behavior to match your self-concept. And when your self-concept is based on limitation, your entire life becomes an expression of that limitation. Psychologist Carol Dweck spent decades researching this phenomenon. Her work on fixed mindset versus growth mindset is essentially research into identity traps. People with a fixed mindset believe that their abilities are static, innate, unchangeable. I am smart, or I am not smart. I am talented, or I am not talented. This identity is established early and remains fixed. People with a growth mindset believe that abilities are developed through effort and learning. I am not good at this yet, but I can get better. Notice the difference. One is an identity statement. I am not smart. The other is a process statement. I am not good at this yet. The first closes doors. The second leaves them open. And the data shows that this difference has profound effects on achievement. Students with a fixed mindset avoid challenges because failure would confirm their limited identity. Students with a growth mindset seek challenges because difficulty is seen as part of the learning process, not a reflection of inherent limitation. This is why negative identity labels are so dangerous. Once you believe I am not a math person, you avoid math. You do not study as hard for math tests. You tell yourself that struggling with math is expected because you are not a math person. And this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You underperform in math, which confirms that you are not a math person, which causes you to disengage further, which causes you to underperform more. The identity trap closes. How many potential engineers never pursued the field because they decided in middle school that they were not math people? How many potential writers never wrote because they decided they were not creative? How many potential entrepreneurs never started a business because they decided they were not business savvy? The identity trap does not just limit performance in a specific domain, it forecloses entire possible futures. But the identity trap is not just about ability. It also shows up in success. This is the imposter syndrome paradox. Imposter syndrome occurs when your external success conflicts with your internal identity. You get promoted, but your identity is that of a mid-level employee. You publish a book, but your identity is that of someone who is not a real writer. You make money, but your identity is that of someone who struggles financially. The dissonance is unbearable. Most people assume imposter syndrome is about low self-esteem or insecurity, but it is actually an identity problem. Your achievements have outpaced your self-image. You are now a different person in the world than you are in your own mind, and your brain cannot tolerate this inconsistency. So it does one of two things. Either it updates your identity to match your success, or it sabotages your success to match your identity. Unfortunately, the second option is far more common. People with imposter syndrome often engage in self-sabotage without realizing it. They turn down opportunities. They downplay their achievements. They avoid visibility. They work themselves to exhaustion, trying to prove they deserve their success, which leads to burnout, which leads to failure, which finally brings their external reality back in line with their internal identity. The identity trap has closed again. Breaking free from an identity trap requires recognizing that it exists. Most people do not question their identity limits because they feel true. I am not a math person feels like an objective fact about reality, not a story I am telling myself. But it is a story, and like any story, it can be questioned, challenged, and rewritten. The first step is to catch yourself using fixed identity language. Anytime you say, I am not the kind of person who, pause, ask yourself, is this actually true? Or is this a story I have been telling myself? Is this based on inherent limitation, or is this based on lack of practice? The second step is to introduce the word yet. I am not good at public speaking yet. I do not have money saved yet. I am not confident in social situations yet. This tiny word transforms a fixed identity statement into a growth process statement. It acknowledges current reality while leaving the door open for change. The third step is to examine the evidence. Most negative identity beliefs are based on very little actual data. Emily decided she was not a math person based on one test in 5th grade. But one data point is not a pattern. If you actually examine your history, you will often find that your negative identity is based on selective memory. You remember the failures and forget the successes. You highlight the moments that confirm your limitation and dismiss the moments that contradict it. The fourth step is to deliberately create contradictory evidence. If you believe you are not creative, force yourself to do something creative every day for 30 days. It does not have to be good. It just has to exist. You are not trying to become a master. You are trying to prove to yourself that the identity is false. And with enough contradictory evidence, your brain will have no choice but to update. But there is an even deeper identity trap. Identities that are inherited rather than chosen. You grow up in a family where money is scarce and money is stressful. You absorb the identity of someone for whom money is a source of anxiety, not possibility. You grow up in a culture that values conformity over individuality. You absorb the identity of someone who does not stand out, who does not take risks, who stays safe. These inherited identities are particularly insidious because you did not choose them. They were programmed into you before you had the awareness to question them. Cultural narratives are powerful identity scripts. Men do not cry. Women are not good at math. Poor people stay poor. Rich people are greedy. These are not just stereotypes. They are identity templates that shape how millions of people see themselves. And if you have internalized one of these templates, it will limit you in ways you do not even recognize because it operates below the level of conscious thought. Breaking free from inherited identities requires what therapists call individuation. You have to separate your self-concept from the identities that were given to you by your family, your culture, your circumstances. You have to ask, who am I when I strip away all the expectations and scripts and labels that were placed on me? And then you have to have the courage to become that person, even if it means disappointing others, even if it means being different from everyone you grew up with. This is terrifying, because rejecting an inherited identity can feel like rejecting your family or your culture. But it is not. You are not rejecting where you came from. You are choosing where you are going. And you cannot choose where you are going if you are trapped in an identity that someone else chose for you. The process of individuation often involves what psychologists call identity moratorium, a period of exploration where you try on different identities to see what fits. This is why adolescence is often turbulent. Teenagers are in identity moratorium, experimenting with different versions of themselves, trying to figure out who they are apart from their parents. But many adults never go through this process. They carry childhood identities into their 30s, 40s, even 50s, never questioning whether these identities serve them. Consider a man who grew up in a working-class family, where college was seen as unnecessary and pretentious. He absorbed the identity of someone who works with his hands, someone who is practical, someone who distrusts intellectuals. This identity served him in his youth. It connected him to his family and community. But now, at 35, he has a curiosity about literature and philosophy. He wants to read, to learn, to engage with ideas. But every time he picks up a book, he feels like he is betraying his identity. He is becoming one of them, one of the people his family distrusted. The inherited identity is a prison. Breaking free requires recognizing that honoring your family does not mean becoming a photocopy of them. You can love where you came from while choosing a different path. You can respect your parents while rejecting the limitations they placed on themselves. This is not betrayal. This is growth. And true family, true community will celebrate your growth even when it makes you different from them. Another common identity trap is the "I have always been this way" narrative. People use their past as evidence that they cannot change. I have always been anxious. I have always been bad with money. I have always been overweight. The word "always" is particularly insidious. because it implies permanence. If you have always been something, the logic goes, then you will always be something. But this is a logical fallacy. Your past is data, not destiny. The fact that you have been something for 20 years does not mean you must be that thing for the next 20 years. The I have always been this way trap is maintained by selective memory. You remember all the instances that confirm the identity and forget the instances that contradict it. If your identity is I have always been socially awkward, your brain will highlight every awkward social interaction and minimize every smooth one. You had a great conversation at a party. Your brain dismisses it as a fluke. You stumbled over your words once. Your brain files it as more evidence of your awkwardness. The identity becomes a self-fulfilling filter on your perception of reality. The identity audit is a tool for spotting these traps. Sit down and list all the identity statements you hold about yourself. I am a hard worker. I am not good with technology. I am someone who values family. I am bad at relationships. For each identity, ask 3 questions. Is this identity serving me or limiting me? Did I choose this identity or was it given to me? What evidence do I have that this identity is actually true? You will find that many of your identities are based on outdated information or inherited beliefs. And once you see them clearly, you can decide which ones to keep and which ones to discard. You are not obligated to remain the person you have been. You are free to become someone new. But that freedom requires awareness. It requires seeing the cage before you can escape it. The same mechanism that can free you can also trap you. The key is conscious direction. Identity is always operating. It is always shaping your behavior. The question is whether you are directing your identity intentionally or whether you are letting it run on autopilot, limiting you with stories that were never even yours to begin with. 6 months from now, you could be a completely different person, not in appearance, but in action, in habit, in identity, not because of motivation or willpower or some external force, but because you chose to become someone different and then proved it to yourself through action. This is not a fantasy. This is a predictable, replicable process based on well-established psychological principles. Everything you have read up to this point has been building toward one question: how do you actually do this? Let us synthesize the complete framework. Willpower fails because it creates internal conflict. You are trying to force behavior that contradicts your identity. This is exhausting and unsustainable. Identity-based change succeeds because it eliminates internal conflict. Once your identity shifts, the behavior becomes automatic. It is no longer something you force. It is something you simply are. The mechanism of identity change operates through 3 interconnected systems. First, cognitive dissonance. Your brain needs consistency between your beliefs and your behaviors. When they conflict, you experience psychological pain. Your brain will resolve this pain either by changing your behavior to match your beliefs, or by changing your beliefs to match your behavior. Second, your self-image. Like Maxwell Maltz discovered, you have an internal thermostat that regulates your behavior to match your self-concept. Change the thermostat, and your behavior automatically adjusts. Third, the evidence loop. Your identity shapes your behavior, but your behavior also shapes your identity. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you are. Accumulate enough votes, and the identity shifts. Now, let us make this practical. Here is the 90-day identity shift plan. This is a timeline for deliberately transforming who you are. Days 1 through 7. The decision phase. You choose your target identity. Remember, it must be specific, believable, and actionable. Not I want to be successful, but I am an entrepreneur building a software company. Not I want to be healthy, but I am someone who values energy and longevity. Write this identity down. Say it out loud. Make the internal commitment. This is who I am becoming. During this first week, you also identify your minimum viable action. What is the smallest thing you can do every single day that counts as evidence for this identity? For a writer, 1 sentence. For an athlete, 10 minutes of movement. For an entrepreneur, 1 task that moves a project forward. The action should be so small that you cannot talk yourself out of it. Days 8 through 30. The foundation phase. This is where you prove to yourself that the identity is real. You execute your minimum viable action every single day, without exception. No matter what, you are not trying to be perfect. You are not trying to do a lot. You are trying to be consistent. You are casting votes. You are generating evidence. Your brain is watching. During this phase, you will feel resistance. The behavior will feel fake, forced, unnatural. This is normal. Your old identity is fighting back. Your brain is skeptical. It has years of contradictory evidence. But you keep going. One day, then another, then another. By day 21, something shifts. The behavior starts to feel slightly more natural. By day 30, you have cast 30 votes for your new identity. The evidence is becoming undeniable. Days 31 through 60. The acceleration phase. Now that the foundation is set, you start to expand. The minimum viable action remains non-negotiable, but you start adding slightly more. The writer who was writing 1 sentence now writes a paragraph. The athlete who was doing 10 minutes now does 20. The expansion is gradual, but it is consistent. You are building on success, not starting from scratch. During this phase, you also introduce social reinforcement. You join a group. You tell select people about your new identity. You seek out models and mentors. You change your environment to support the identity. You are no longer doing this alone. You are embedding yourself in a social context that validates and reinforces who you are becoming. Days 61 through 90. The integration phase. By now, the identity is starting to feel real. The behavior is largely automatic. You do not have to fight yourself every day. But this is also where many people plateau or regress. They get comfortable. They stop being intentional. The integration phase is about making the identity permanent. You look for identity conflicts. Are there areas of your life where you are still acting according to your old identity? You work to eliminate these conflicts and create coherence across all domains. You also start to think about the next identity, because identity change is not a one-time event. It is a continuous process of becoming. You never stop evolving. You never stop growing. The question is always, who am I becoming next? Throughout this 90-day process, you will have setbacks. You will miss a day. You will slip into old patterns. You will doubt whether this is working. This is where the 2-day rule becomes critical. Missing 1 day is fine. Missing 2 days in a row is a crisis. When you slip, you do not spiral. You do not tell yourself you have failed. You simply reset. The next day, you are back to your minimum viable action. The chain continues. Setbacks do not destroy identity. They are part of the process. The difference between someone who succeeds at identity change and someone who fails is not whether they have setbacks. It is how they respond to setbacks. A failure is only a failure if you let it define you. If you treat it as temporary data, as a moment rather than a verdict, then it becomes part of the evidence loop. You learn from it and adjust. Your identity continues to evolve. When you do experience a setback, and you will, use the reset protocol. First, acknowledge what happened without judgment. You missed a day at the gym. You ate junk food. You skipped your writing. State it as a fact, not as a character flaw. Second, identify the trigger. What circumstances led to the setback? Were you tired, stressed, in a particular environment? Understanding the trigger helps you plan for it next time. Third, Recommit to your identity. You are still a runner, even though you missed one day. You are still a healthy eater, even though you had one bad meal. The identity remains intact. Fourth, execute your minimum viable action as soon as possible. Do not wait for tomorrow. Do not wait for Monday. Do it today, right now if possible. This sends an immediate signal to your brain that the setback was an anomaly, not the beginning of a new pattern. The reset protocol is crucial because your brain is always looking for patterns. One missed day, followed by immediate return to the habit, signals resilience. One missed day followed by delay signals, the beginning of quitting. The speed of your recovery matters more than the setback itself. Another key strategy during the 90-day process is to track your evidence visibly. Jerry Seinfeld's calendar method works because it makes your identity evidence tangible. You can see the chain of X marks. You can see proof that you are the person you claim to be. This visual tracking serves multiple purposes. It provides motivation on days when you do not feel like doing the work. It creates accountability because breaking the chain feels like a loss, and it gives you data to analyze. If you notice you always miss on Thursdays, you can adjust your approach for Thursdays specifically. Tracking does not have to be complex. A simple calendar with X marks works. A habit tracking app works. A jar where you add a marble every day works. The medium does not matter. What matters is that you have a physical representation of your identity. Evidence that you can see and reflect on. This transforms the abstract concept of identity into concrete, countable reality. This brings us to the final mindset shift. You are never done becoming. There is no finish line where you finally arrive at your ideal self and then coast forever. Identity is always in flux. You are always changing. The question is whether you are directing that change or being shaped by random circumstances. Whether you are the author of your own story or just a character in someone else's. The identity evolution mindset means you see yourself as always in progress, always learning, always becoming. You hold your identities lightly. You are committed to them, but not attached. You know that the person you are today might not be the person you need to be tomorrow, and you are okay with that, because growth is not about arriving. It is about the journey. It is about the continuous act of becoming. So here is the final challenge. Who do you choose to be? Not who do you want to be? Not who are you trying to be? Who are you? Right now, today, in this moment. What identity are you claiming? And what are you going to do today to prove it? You are not your past. You are not your failures. You are not even your successes. You are not the labels that were put on you by your family, or your culture, or your circumstances. You are not the stories you have been telling yourself for years. You are the story you tell yourself about who you are starting right now. And starting today, you can tell a different story. Every action you take from this moment forward is either a vote for the person you want to become, or a vote for the person you are trying to leave behind. There is no neutral. Every single choice is meaningful. The small things matter more than the big things, because the small things happen every day, and it is the accumulation of daily actions that determines who you are. So cast your vote. Choose your identity. Commit fully. Execute your minimum viable action. Generate evidence. Surround yourself with people who embody what you are trying to become. Eliminate identity conflicts. Break free from inherited limitations. And watch as your life transforms, not because you tried harder, but because you became someone different. This is not about motivation. This is not about willpower. This is not about positive thinking, or vision boards, or affirmations. This is about understanding the deep psychological mechanisms that govern human behavior and using those mechanisms deliberately. This is about recognizing that behavior is always downstream from identity, and if you want to change your behavior permanently, You must change your identity first. You have the knowledge now. You have the framework. You have the specific steps. The only question that remains is whether you will use them, whether you will take the leap, whether you will claim a new identity today and then prove it to yourself, one small action at a time. 6 months from now, you could be running marathons. You could be writing every day. You could be sober. You could be confident. You could be wealthy. You could be anything. Not because you got lucky, not because someone gave you permission, but because you decided that is who you are. And then you acted accordingly until your brain had no choice but to believe you. The ship is waiting. The planks are ready to be replaced. One by one, day by day, action by action, until the old ship is gone and a new one remains. Still you, but also completely different. This is the paradox of transformation. You become someone new while remaining yourself. You change everything while losing nothing essential, because who you are at your core is not fixed. It is fluid. It is always becoming, and you get to decide what it becomes. So decide. Right now. Who are you? Say it out loud. Write it down. Commit to it. And then go prove it. Cast your first vote today, and then tomorrow cast another. And keep casting votes until the evidence is overwhelming, until the identity is undeniable, until you are no longer trying to be someone new. You are someone new. This is the science of permanent change. This is identity shifting. This is how you stop fighting yourself and start becoming yourself. Not the self you were, the self you choose, the self you build, one action at a time, starting now.